All right, I'll just get straight into it. My name's Jake, and I honestly never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this, but here I am. It's been a hell of a ride, and I need to get this off my chest because I'm still trying to process what I saw that night. So let me set the scene for you. My wife Emily and I have been married for about 6 years now. We met in college, fell hard, and honestly, I thought we were solid. I mean, we had our ups and downs, sure, but I trusted her. Or at least I did until I saw her true colors. Our anniversary was last weekend, and I was planning to make it special. Emily's a bit of a diva, always has a snarky comment ready, always wants things her way, but I loved her anyway. I thought maybe if I pulled off something nice, she'd soften up. I booked a fancy dinner, got us a nice hotel, and even surprised her with tickets to that concert she's been talking about for months. It was supposed to be perfect. The party was at our house because Emily insisted she wanted to host something intimate with friends and family. The house was decorated, the food was good, and everyone was having a good time. I was dancing with our daughter, Lily. She's 5, full of energy, and she loves that I dance with her. We were spinning around, laughing, when I noticed Emily acting a little strange. She was chatting with a guy I'd never really seen before, some guy named Mark from her work. She seemed different, flirtatious maybe. I couldn't tell if I was just imagining it, but the way she looked at him, the way she was smiling too much, it set off warning bells in my head. Then I saw her slip away from the group smoothly, like she knew exactly what she was doing. I was still holding Lily's hand, so I didn't immediately follow, but my gut told me something was wrong. I kept an eye on her from a distance, pretending to be busy with the party, but I kept watching. That's when I saw them sneaking out of the backyard. Emily was holding Mark's hand, and they went around the corner behind the bushes. I froze. My stomach dropped. The scene played in my head like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. I was furious, confused, hurt. I didn't understand how she could betray me like that on our anniversary of all days. She'd been acting so bitchy lately, snapping at me over little things, acting like she didn't care. And I kept ignoring the signs, thinking maybe she was just stressed or tired. But this was something else entirely. I watched for a few more seconds as they kissed behind the bushes, and I knew I'd never be able to look at her the same way again. That's where I am now, trying to figure out what to do next, how to confront her, and whether I'll ever trust her again. The moment I saw her and Mark disappearing behind the bushes, everything else faded into the background. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might explode. I didn't even think. I just started walking toward them, furious and hurt at the same time. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. How could she do this? On our anniversary, with someone I barely knew, it felt like a punch in the gut, and I was cold with shock. I remember standing there behind the corner, trying to be quiet, watching as Emily pressed herself against Mark, her hands in his hair, her lips on his. She was so shameless, so brazen. I felt like I might throw up. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I didn't want to believe it was real, but there they were, clearly caught in the act. No way to deny it anymore. My wife, my partner, my girl, was cheating on me with her coworker. And it was right there, raw and unforgiving in front of my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wanted to run out there and yell, scream, punch something, anything to make this pain go away. But I knew I needed to stay calm, at least for a little longer. I backed up slowly, my head swimming. The worst part, I hadn't even noticed how hot it got or how my hands were trembling until I felt sweat on my forehead. I had to get out of there, away from the scene. I couldn't confront her right then. Not like that. Instead, I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to hold it together, but my mind was exploding with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just that night, or had it been going on for months? Why her? She always acted so bitchy, so dismissive of me. Maybe she was just unhappy, or maybe she just never loved me like I thought she did. I'm not gonna lie, part of me wanted to break down right then and there, but I held it in because I didn't want her to see me like that. I just kept staring at my reflection, feeling like a complete idiot for trusting her, for believing we were solid. I knew I had to confront her eventually. It was eating me alive inside. I couldn't just let her lie her way out of this, not after what I saw. I had to gather my strength. But honestly, that moment in the bathroom was the first real crack in my world. I realized I'd been naive, blind even, to her true nature. She always had a sharp tongue, a bitchy attitude, and a tendency to lie her ass off. I guess. I just didn't want to see that she was capable of betraying me in the worst way possible. After a while, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I went back out, found her near the snack table, acting like everything was normal. I looked her in the eyes and saw that familiar smirk, the one she always uses when she's about to lie her way out of something. That's when I knew I had to call her out. I told her I saw her sneaking away with Mark. Her expression immediately changed, shock, anger, a little defiance all rolled into one. She rolled her eyes, looked at me like I was crazy, and started spinning her usual bullshit about how I must have misunderstood, how she was just saying hello, how I was paranoid or jealous. That's her favorite line, "You're just jealous," or "You're imagining things." She always has an excuse for everything, but I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I felt this overwhelming mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she look me in the eye and deny something so obvious? I never thought I'd be one of those guys to catch their wife cheating, but here I was, staring at the woman I loved, feeling like I didn't even know her anymore. The shock turned into a cold, burning anger, and I knew I had to decide what to do next. I couldn't stay with someone who would lie to my face like that, especially not after I saw her screwing around on me on our anniversary of all days. That's when I started planning my next move. I didn't want to destroy everything right away, but I couldn't just let her get away with this either. I needed to think to get my head straight. I told her I was leaving for a bit to clear my head, and I went out for a drive trying to keep from losing it. All I kept thinking was, how could she do this? How could she lie so easily? And most of all, how do I move on from this? Because right now I'm just lost, hurt, betrayed, and angry as hell. I drove around aimlessly for what felt like hours. The streets were dark and quiet, and every mile I put between myself and that house felt like a mile away from the girl I thought I knew. I kept replaying everything I saw, the way Emily acted toward Mark, the way she snuck away like she was hiding something, her shameless kiss behind the bushes. It was all burned into my mind, and honestly, it felt like some sick nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At first, I was furious. I was angry at Emily, furious at myself, and mostly I was just crushed. I kept asking myself, how did I miss the signs? Why didn't I see this coming? We had our issues, sure, but I thought we were still solid. Turns out I was just fooling myself. The girl I had trusted, the girl I loved so much, had been lying to my face this entire time. It hurt so bad I could barely breathe. Every heartbeat felt like a punch to the chest. But then, as the night dragged on, something shifted. The anger started to turn into a deep, gnawing emptiness. I began to see her true colors, not as the girl who'd smile sweetly at me or complain about her day, but as someone selfish, manipulative, and totally capable of betrayal. It wasn't just about the sex, though. That was a big part of it. It was the lies, the deception, the way she lied without even blinking. She had played me for a fool, and I was just another pawn in her game. That realization hit me harder than the betrayal itself. I remember sitting on a park bench, just staring at the darkness around me, feeling numb and broken. I thought about my daughter, Lily, who adored her mother, and how I'd have to explain to her someday why Mommy wasn't coming back. I thought about all the future plans Emily and I had, our vacations, our home, our family, and how they'd all come crashing down in one night. It was like watching my entire life crumble before my eyes. But amid all that pain, a tiny voice inside me kept saying, I can't let her get away with this. I can't pretend it didn't happen. I had to do something. I couldn't just walk away without confronting her. I felt that if I didn't, I'd carry this bitterness forever. I wanted her to own what she did, to face the damage she caused. That's when I decided I'd come back and have the hardest conversation of my life. When I finally pulled back into the driveway at around 3 a.m., I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and still furious. I opened the door knowing that the house was quiet now, that everyone else was asleep, and that I was about to face her, face the girl I thought I knew. I went straight to our bedroom where Emily was lying on the bed, pretending to sleep. She looked so innocent, so unaware of what was coming. I knew I had to be calm, but inside I was raging. I sat down on the edge of the bed, looked her in the eyes, and told her I saw everything. I told her I knew she'd been cheating on me with Mark. Her reaction was priceless. Her eyes widened, her face flushed with embarrassment and defiance. She rolled her eyes and scoffed, acting like I was out of my mind. She threw out some typical lies. "You're just jealous. You don't know what you're talking about. I was just talking to him. It's nothing." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew the truth. She tried to deny it, then got defensive, then started accusing me of all sorts of things, being paranoid, controlling, insecure. She kept spinning her web of lies, but I saw through it. I felt a wave of disgust and disappointment wash over me. I looked at her, this bitch who'd been lying to me for months, and I realized how much she'd used me, how little she cared about our vows, about what we had. I felt a cold rage settle in, and I knew I'd have to make some choices soon, because I wasn't going to let her keep lying, not anymore. I told her I was done. I told her I couldn't stay married to someone who'd cheat and lie like that. The way she looked at me after that, I'd never seen her so furious. She started yelling, calling me all kinds of names, trying to guilt-trip me, but I shut her down. I told her she'd crossed a line I'd never allow her to cross again. I was hurt, yes, but I was also pissed off, and I knew I couldn't stay with her. Not after this. Not after she shattered everything I believed in. That night I packed a bag, told her I was leaving, and I walked out of that house not knowing what the future held. Honestly, I don't think I've ever felt so broken and yet so free at the same time. The betrayal cut deep, but I also realized I deserved better. I needed time to heal, to figure out what I was going to do next. But one thing was clear, I was done trusting her. I just didn't know how I was going to rebuild my life from this mess. The days that followed were the hardest I've ever experienced. I stayed away from the house, mostly because I couldn't stand to see her face, hear her lies, or feel that sick knot in my stomach every time I thought about what she did. I kept replaying that night, her sneaking off, the kiss behind the bushes, the way she'd lied to me over and over again. It was like some twisted nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and I didn't even know how to start untangling myself from it all. I stayed with a buddy for a few days, just trying to breathe, trying not to go crazy. My mind kept circling back to Lily, my little girl who adored her mother, and I kept asking myself what I was supposed to tell her. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her mom would betray her dad like that? That she'd cheat on me? It felt wrong to keep her in the middle of all this, but I also didn't want her to feel like her world was falling apart. It was a mess I didn't even know how to navigate. Meanwhile, Emily was livid. She called me nonstop, leaving these long, bitchy voice messages about how I was ruining everything, how I was overreacting, and how she was just having a moment of weakness. Yeah, right, I knew better. I knew it was more than just a moment. She kept saying she loved me, that she'd never meant to hurt me, but her words sounded hollow. She was trying to guilt me into coming back, but I wasn't falling for it. I knew her pattern. She'd lie, deny, then manipulate her way out of the situation. I'd seen her do it before. One moment I'll never forget was when I found out she'd been lying about her whereabouts that night. I got a hold of her phone when she wasn't looking, and I saw the texts. She'd been telling Mark all kinds of things about how she was so lonely, how she needed someone to feel alive, and all this BS that made me sick. She was openly bragging about how good their little affair was. That was the moment I knew she had no remorse, no shame. She was just playing her games and hoping I'd never find out. That realization hit me hard. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this? How could she be so callous? I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my life, and she threw it away like it was nothing. I kept asking myself if I was the fool or if I'd been blind all along. Maybe I'd been too comfortable, too naive. But now I could see clearly. She was a bitchy, manipulative woman who thought she could lie her way out of everything. Well, I wasn't going to let her get away with it anymore. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The pain was eating me up inside, and I needed to confront her face to face. I decided I'd go back home, not to patch things up, but to get some closure. I wanted her to see that I knew exactly what she'd done and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. When I arrived at the house, she was waiting by the door, trying to look innocent, like she hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible. That fake, bitchy smirk of hers made my blood boil. I told her I knew everything, the affair, the lies, the sneaking around. I told her I was done playing her game. Her reaction, typical. She started with the blame shifting, saying I was paranoid and insecure, that she needed space, and that I'd pushed her away. She kept calling me controlling, jealous, and trying to make me feel guilty. But I wasn't having it. I'd already seen through her bullshit. I told her she could lie all she wanted, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I was done with her lies, her manipulations, her sneaky attitude. That's when she got nasty. She started yelling, calling me an idiot, saying I'd ruined everything, that she'd never loved me anyway. She threw out phrases like, "I don't need you. You're just holding me back," and all that other drama. I saw her for what she was: bitchy, entitled, and selfish. I realized that she'd been using me for her convenience for ages. That's the moment I decided I'd had enough. I told her to pack her shit and leave. I told her I didn't want her in my life anymore, that I was done pretending everything was okay. She tried to argue, to guilt-trip me, but I shut her down. Honestly, I felt numb. I'd been hurt so bad I couldn't even cry anymore. Just rage, disappointment, and a strange sense of relief that I finally saw her for what she was. This was the end of my marriage, and I wasn't going to look back. I told her she could take her bitchy attitude and her lies somewhere else, because I was done being a fool. And that was it. I watched her walk out, knowing I'd never trust her again, and I felt a strange mix of freedom and heartbreak. The next chapter of my life was about figuring out how to pick up the pieces. But one thing was clear: trust was gone, and I'd never let anyone treat me like that again. The days after she left were a blur of emotion and uncertainty. I stayed mostly alone in the house, trying to piece together what had happened and what it meant for my future. Every corner, every room seemed to echo with memories of us, memories I now looked at with a bitter taste. I'd go from feeling numb to moments of intense anger, then to deep sadness and back again. It was like my mind was a battlefield, and I was just trying to survive the chaos. Lily was the only thing keeping me grounded. She kept asking questions about Mommy, about why she wasn't home, about what all the fuss was. I told her Mommy was busy and that she was taking some time to herself. I wanted to shield her from the full extent of what I'd seen, but I knew she sensed something was wrong. That broke my heart even more. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her mother cheated on her dad? I couldn't do that, so I just held her tight and promised everything would be okay, even though I didn't believe it myself. Meanwhile, Emily was trying to stay in control. She called repeatedly, mostly bitchy messages accusing me of ruining everything, saying I was crazy or that I was overreacting because I was jealous. She kept insisting she loved me, which I found laughable at that point. She was so dismissive, so full of herself, acting like she was the victim here. She'd call at all hours, sometimes crying, sometimes furious, trying to guilt-trip me into taking her back. But I wasn't stupid. I knew her game. She'd lie, deny, and then accuse me of being the one with the problem. One of the most infuriating things was how she kept trying to spin her betrayal as some kind of mistake, like it was just a moment of weakness. That's her favorite line. It didn't mean anything, or it's just sex, it's not a big deal. But to me, it was everything. It shattered the trust I'd built with her, and it made me see her as someone entirely different, selfish, manipulative, and unfaithful. She never apologized, never owned up to what she did. Instead, she kept lying, acting like I was the one losing my mind for even thinking she'd cheat. I started thinking about what I really wanted. Honestly, the idea of working things out seemed impossible. How could I forgive someone who lied so effortlessly? How do you move past that kind of betrayal? I realized that I'd been holding on to hope, thinking maybe she'd change, maybe she'd see the damage she'd done. But deep down, I knew she wasn't going to change. She was who she was, a bitchy woman who lied and cheated, and she didn't care about the consequences. I also began to consider my options. Divorce, I knew, was inevitable, but I was in no rush. I needed time to heal, to figure out how to rebuild my life without her. I started talking to a few close friends, asking for advice, and trying to find a way to get through this mess. I knew I wasn't the first guy to get dumped on like this, but that didn't make it any easier. It just made me realize how much I'd trusted her, how much I'd believed in us, and how blind I'd been. The hardest part was facing the reality that I'd never get those years back. The years I thought I shared with someone who'd turn out to be so different behind closed doors. I kept asking myself, did I really know her at all? Or was I just fooling myself into thinking she was someone she was? The answer hit me hard. I'd been naive and now I was paying the price for it. But I also knew I had to be strong, for Lily, for myself. Because I couldn't let her win this, couldn't let her walk all over me and get away with destroying what we had. Despite all the pain, I was starting to see that this betrayal, as terrible as it was also a wake-up call. A brutal but honest lesson that trust is fragile, that some people just aren't who they pretend to be. I knew I'd have to rebuild my life from scratch, piece by piece, without her. And somehow I'd do it. But right now I was just trying to survive the aftermath, trying to keep my head above water. Weeks turned into a month and everything felt like a long, slow recovery. I spent most days working, taking care of Lily, and trying to block out the constant noise in my head. The pain of betrayal never fully went away, but I started to get some clarity. I realized that trusting Emily was a mistake I shouldn't have made, not after I saw her sneaking off with Mark right in front of me. It was a brutal lesson, but one I had to learn if I wanted to move forward. I finally sat down with her face to face one afternoon after she kept calling and texting, trying to guilt me back into giving her another chance. I told her I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. I'd heard enough lies. I told her I wanted a divorce and I wanted her to leave for good. She didn't argue much, just spat out some bitchy remark about how I was overreacting and that she'd never meant to hurt me. Honestly, I didn't care what she thought anymore. She burned that bridge long ago. The process of separating was messy but necessary. We agreed on custody of Lily, and I made sure she'd be taken care of, even if I didn't trust her anymore. I knew I'd need therapy, maybe even a lawyer, to help me navigate the aftermath. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying the betrayal, trying to understand how someone I loved could be so cold and selfish. But I also knew I had to let go of her, of the anger, of the hope that things would magically turn around. Over time, I started rebuilding my life. I found comfort in small routines, work, spending time with Lily, hanging out with friends. Slowly, I began to see that I didn't need someone like Emily in my corner. Her betrayal had shown me who she really was, and honestly, I'm better off without her. The trust once shattered can't be fixed, and I've learned that some people are just not worth the pain they cause. Now, looking back, I realize that I've grown stronger through all this. I'm more cautious, more aware of red flags, and definitely more resilient. I've learned that trust is earned, not given freely, and that sometimes loving someone means knowing when to walk away. That betrayal, as hurtful as it was, pushed me to become a better version of myself, someone who values honesty, loyalty, and respect above all. To anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore your gut. If something feels off, pay attention to it. You deserve honesty and fidelity. If someone can't give you that, then they don't deserve your time or your love. And remember, healing takes time. Be kind to yourself, don't rush the process, and never let anyone make you feel less than you are. I may never fully forget what happened, but I've learned to live with it. I've learned to forgive myself for trusting too easily and to forgive her, not because she deserves it, but because holding on to that anger only hurts me. I hope that someday I'll find someone who truly values me, someone I can trust without doubt. Until then, I'll keep moving forward, wiser, stronger, and more cautious, but ready for whatever life throws my way.